Hey YouTube, we're finally getting things kicked off. I'm glad that you tuned in and are watching. Hopefully we can make this as interesting as possible. Uh, Again, I just want to clear up a few things before we begin. These videos that I'll be making are supposed to go in sequential order, and that applies to the person that's watching and practicing, as well as just the instruction that's given. So in other words, if you're of the mindset, well, I'll just go to the song tutorials before I check out, all this boring theory stuff. If you're not very uh, learned and don't have a very thorough and comprehensive understanding of music theory, it may not do you the best good to go ahead and watch the song tutorials, because I will be doing a lot of chording with, just calling the chords what they are, not doing a whole bunch of spelling out, and not really doing a lot of, rudimentary explaining. I may, say something is an inversion, and if you don't know what that is, it's probably because you may have fast forwarded and, went ahead and went to the later videos. So I would caution you, and just for your own, understanding in general, it's just always better to start at the beginning, and that way you're not having any gaps in your knowledge. Another thing is I don't want to at any point be condescending or sarcastic or be a smart aleck. Um, I will say that I have ran across a variety of musicians, and to me it just helps if you have some understanding of what it is that you're doing. That's all that I wish to convey, and so I don't ever want to come across in any other way than just trying to be helpful. I don't claim to know everything. I know very little, but I had privileges to learn and watch from other musicians, and so I'm just sharing a few things that I've learned. Last but not least, certainly not least, um, these are my personal videos that I'm making for my fellow CGC musicians out there. And I say that because I don't want anybody to, um, for some reason, call up the church office here in Jeffersonville and, be asking for, are those videos on CD or DVD or anything like that? They won't know what you're talking about, because this is my own personal investment, as it is trying to help other musicians out there that have reached out and want to, learn a few things. So I put that disclaimer at every video, that these are my own personal ones. And even though I play, up here in Jeffersonville, which is a wonderful privilege, the churches, I'm not being sponsored by anybody. I just want to make that clear. But I think that's pretty much everything. And just as a final warning, as you can see, I'm not in the studio. So you may hear, the sounds of nature and other things at different times. And so I do apologize. I'll try to keep everything as professional as possible. But, bear with me, and we'll see if we can make the best of this. We're going to start out, and I'm going to try and go in order. I may do a little bit of backtracking. Sometimes it's very difficult to talk about things in completely sequential order, because in order to explain one thing, you may need to go back, or you may need to go forward and kind of make reference, and vice versa. So please bear with me. I'm going to try and start very simply, and by the end of all of the theory sets of videos, I want you to be able to, have an understanding of chords and altered chords, so that whenever you're looking at a chord sheet, you know what you're looking at. I want to make it to where after you've watched all of these, I mean, at worst, you are comfortable with 99% of chord sheets that you will run across, in order to be able to play, and just an understanding of music. That in no way means that you won't have to practice, and that's why I decided to make videos, so everybody could do things at their own speed. So with all of that in mind, let's start off. We're going to start off really simply, and we're going to just discuss notes. Very simply on the piano, just because of the way it's laid out, we have 7 notes, and they repeat over and over, as you can see just the way that the piano is laid out. And they are named after the first 7 letters of the alphabet. So we have A, as you can see here, and all of the A's sound very similar to each other. They're just higher or lower, and they're in the same spot on the keyboard. And then we go up to B. Again, all the B's are in the same spot and sound very similar. As you're probably guessing now, all the C's are in the same spot and they sound similar. D, E, F, and G. Okay, so again, named after the first 7 letters of the alphabet. That is the white notes, or the natural notes, as they are also called. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Again, all in the same spot, and they repeat over and over again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Over again, I'm just using a 61 key keyboard. An actual piano has 88, and the lowest note is A, and the highest note is C. So now we've covered notes, we're going to talk about intervals, because that helps us understand what these black notes are. They're referred to as sharps and flats, and if you don't understand intervals, then you're not going to really know why they're called sharps and flats. So all of these natural notes that we've discussed, we can either raise them or lower them by what's called a half step. A half step is the smallest unit of an interval, which is the distance between 2 notes. So let me clarify that. Starting with, let's just pick A, and I'll go a little bit forward and then I'll come back and we'll discuss half steps. So if I start with A, from A to B is a second. A to C is a third, fourth, fifth, 6th, 7th, and then there's no such thing as an 8th. We have an octave. In music, we discuss if the note's 8 notes apart, that's referred to as being an octave apart. So when we talk about flats and sharps, here's an A, and if we raise this A up a half step to the next closest note, which is this black note right here, if we raise it up a half step, now I know it's saying B flat here, but if we raise it up a half step, it's an A sharp. The reason that this is being called B flat is because it's more common to be referred to as B flat. And where they're getting that, as you can see on the screen, is them taking the note B and lowering it a half step. So if you raise a note up a half step, it's a sharp. If you lower it a half step, it's a flat. Let's take another example. Here is F. We raise F a half step. This says G flat. It could also be F sharp. And the program I'm using, the reason it's showing as that is because of the settings that I have. But I'm going to change that really quickly just so you can see. Again, you can see that it says all flats. I'm going to click on all sharps just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So here's C, raise it up a half step, C sharp. Here's D, raise it up a half step, the next closest note, D sharp. F up a half step, F sharp. G up a half step, G sharp. So you're probably confused now, saying, well, how will I know if it is, a C sharp or if it's a D flat? Well, that gets us into keys. If you know what key you're in, you will never call a note something that it's not. Now I want to stop right here and I want to clarify something. As we saw, we had some notes that were the same note. This was C sharp, but we also saw that it could be D flat. When a note has 2 names, as we say in music, it's called an enharmonic. And that's harmonic with an EN right before it. Enharmonic, not IN. But an enharmonic note is a note that has 2 names, C sharp and D flat. They're enharmonic. They're the same note, but they have 2 names. It just depends on what key that you're in. Now, before we get into keys, we got to continue talking about intervals. We saw that from a note, I'm going to just pick C, to the next closest note was a half step. So if we can do the math here, we can see that from this note to this note is a half step. And if the math follows, a half and a half make a whole. So from C to D is a whole step. Now, if at any point in these videos you were confused, pause, go back, and watch it again. Again, I'm trying to go very slow, but I don't want to go too slow to where I'm boring. I don't want to go too fast to where I'm just, not being clear. But in order to understand keys and scales, we've got to understand intervals and the difference between a whole step and a half step. So a half step is from one note to the next, the closest note right after it, okay? So C to C sharp, just reviewing, half step. C to D, whole step. Now, in order to understand the concept of keys, we have to use what's called a major scale. A scale in general is a predetermined series of whole steps and half steps. And you have different types of scales. You have your major scale, you have minor scales. You have three different types of minor. You have your natural minor or your pure minor scale. You have a harmonic minor, you have a melodic minor. And those are all three different types of minor scales. You have a gypsy scale, you have an octatonic scale, you've got your chromatic scale, you've got a pentatonic scale. You have lots of different scales, and those scales are determined by a set of whole steps and half steps. You start on this note, and this scale may require a whole step, and then a half step, or this scale may require a half step and then a whole step and then a half, and then but you have to go by whatever that scale requires. Since we're trying to understand the concept of keys, we need to understand the major scale, and we need to understand how a major scale is built. And this will help us to never be confused on what to call a note, if it's a sharp or a flat. We're going to start very simply with one of the easiest keys and scales. We're going to start with C. And we're going to build a major scale starting with C. Now, to build a major scale, the series of whole steps and half steps that you need are whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. In other words, you start with your note. We're going to start with C. We're going to go up a whole step, a half, whole, 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 half. So let's start with that again one more time. Starting with C, we have whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. These are half steps. Even though they're both natural notes, don't be confused. This is a half step. From E to F is a half step because there's nothing in between. From E to F, they are already the closest note next to each other. So don't let that trip you up. And again, the same thing from B to C. Okay, that trips up a lot of beginners. They think that, because F to G is a whole step, well, then that means that all natural notes are a whole step apart. But don't let that trip you. So we see then when we make a major scale starting with C, let's just play it again. We have C, we have D, E, F, G, A, B, and back to C. So in the key of C then, we don't have any sharps or flats that we use. There were no black notes. So a lot of beginning players love the key of C because they're visually, able to understand, okay, I don't need to hit any of these black notes. For musicians, sometimes on piano, they don't like to play with the sharps and flats. I've never really understood, but I guess that's not for me to understand. But in the key of C, we see that We don't have any sharps or flats. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Get used to playing that scale. Get used to knowing that in the key of C, you're not going to have any sharps or flats. Okay? Now, once you've understood that, then you have to also understand how the naming of notes work. Now, it's very easy in C because in C there are no sharps or flats. So when we're naming the notes in the key of C, it's very simple because we're using all natural notes. So let's take the key of G. We're going to start on G. We're going to take our same pattern, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So we're going to have whole, whole, half, whole, whole. Now I need another whole step, and it can't be that note. It can't be that F because that's a half step. I need that note. That's going to be my whole step and then my final half step. Starting with G, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So what you're seeing on the screen, it's already showing you that that's F sharp. You say, well, why is it not, G flat? Because, and this is the rule, this is how you will know, you always have to use the name of the next note. You always have to use the name of the next note. In other words, I can't have G, A, B, C, D, E, G flat, G. I have to have an F something. I have to have an F something. And we know it can't be this F natural, so it has to be an F sharp. Okay? That's how you'll know. So in the key of G, there's no G flat. There's an F sharp. And there's only one black note in the key of G, and that is that F sharp that's there. Okay? We could take the same thing starting with the key of, I'll pick a little bit more advanced one. We'll go with E. Key of E. Okay? So we've got a whole step. Now right off the bat, we got to have a black note here because we have to have a whole step from E. So we start on E, we have a whole of another whole, have a half, whole, 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 half. So we see we have 4 black notes that we hit in the key of E. The key of E has 4 sharps. And we know that it's not E, G flat. It has to be E, F sharp because we have to go to the next letter. E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and then back to E. Okay, that's how we do it. That's how we make our scales. So you can go to any key and use that pattern. Now, you say, well, then can I call this, if I make a scale with this, can I call it A sharp? I know it's showing A sharp because I have everything set to sharps, but you will find out that you can't, because if this is A sharp, then this would have to be, I'm going to get a little advanced here, but hang with me. This would have to be B sharp, which is possible, but then here, this has to be a C something. This would have to be C double sharp. I know we haven't gotten into double accidentals, but that's the reason you just have either sharps or flats. You can't have those doubles in what's called the key signature. You can't have that. In the key of C, we have no sharps or flats. We saw in the key of G, we had 1 sharp. In the key of E, we had 4 sharps. So that's that. When I say key signature, that's what I mean. It's the number of sharps or flats that lets you know what key that you're in. Here in Jeff, we'll use 4 up. If I flash the musicians with a 4 up, they know we're in the key of E because up means sharp, because sharps raise notes, and they know that's E. And there's no guesswork because that's the only key that's going to have those sharps. Now, if you're dead set on trying to find all the exceptions to the rules, I'll go ahead and spare you. There are some, not just inharmonic notes that we talked about, there are some inharmonic keys. 3, in fact. There is the key of B, which can also be the key of C flat, you will more often see it as B than C flat. There's the key of G flat or F sharp, and then there's the key of D flat or C sharp. Okay, and again, take the pattern, you will be able to figure out what to call it and when. Okay, as far as those note names, keep in mind if you're in a sharp key, everything has to be sharp. You can't have flats and sharps in the same key signature. That's a personal pet peeve of mine when I'm looking at chord charts of people that have just, tried to throw something together and they have sharps and flats in the same chord. It just drives me insane, and I can't hardly take that. So if you're in flats, say flats. If you're in sharps, say sharps. And again, that should get you through being able to play those scales and be very comfortable. I know the key of B has lots of sharps and all of that stuff, and F sharp may seem a little bit cumbersome. Become comfortable with that. That's where your practice comes in to play. The last thing that I want to discuss on this video is scale degrees, and scale degrees is going to lead us into something else on the next video that I'd like to talk about when we talk about chords. Scale degrees. And I want to drive this home because you have scale degrees of the key that you're in, but then you can also have scale degrees of chords. When you're in a key, you play different chords. And so whenever I am trying to specify the scale degree of a chord or a key, I try to be very specific so that way you're not confused. So I want to start off, when I talk about scale degrees of keys, let's take, for instance, the key of C. No sharps, no flats. C is the first scale degree. D is the second scale degree. E is the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, back to C as the octave. Now, in very contemporary music, you may see numbers after chords. This is all where it stems from, and I'll tackle it a little bit later in depth, but I just want to give you kind of a forewarning. When you see like 13s, what they're doing is starting with that note and going up. I'll explain. For instance, we have C, D, E is the third, F is the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, the octave. Now, if we keep going with this numbering system, we come back to D, but instead of saying that's the second, it's going to be the ninth. E from our original C is the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and back to the original octave. After 2 octaves, you come back to the beginning. So there's no such thing as a 15th, but I just want to explain that. So the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh scale degrees, of those notes, you need to know them in each key. You need to know in the key of C, scale degree 5 is G. In the key of A flat, scale degree 4 is D flat. Okay, I know it says C sharp, but again, bear with me because I'm using a program here. But be aware of that, because that will help you when we talk about just a basic number system that most musicians use. I'll cover that in the next video. I think that's pretty much all I want to tackle today. If this in any way has been helpful, please let me know. If I skipped over something, please let me know. If I didn't go into anything in detail, please let me know. Again, I'm not trying to in any way be insulting or just completely blowing you guys out of the water. Either way, I want to be right where is most helpful. So like, subscribe, don't subscribe, whatever you feel you need to do. But I do want to be helpful. So thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.